These are a couple of pieces of amethyst that I've had in my inventory for many years. I didn't write down when I bought them where they were from or much about them, so I don't know if they're where they originated from. So I'm going to cut these for our earring project. Let me take a look at them in the refractol to see if there's any internal issues that I need to be concerned about. So refractol is a liquid that has the same refractive index almost as quartz. So what that allows you to do is kind of see through the stone, because with the same refractive index, it kind of makes the outside of the stone look like it was polished. So we can see into this stone, these stones. I see a little bit of zoning, but since I'm going to cut the points, the color will be down in the bottom of the pavilion, which will flood the stone with color. So this color zoning is not going to be a problem in either one of these stones. I don't see any internal black spots, any fractures, anything to be too concerned about as far as the quality of these stones. They both look pretty clean, so I'll go ahead and put these stones on the dot, and we're ready to start cutting them. As is often the case, my wife BOPIE will receive a special order from a client for a unique piece of jewelry. In this case, the customer wants a pair of earrings cut from amethyst into a Portuguese design. BOPIE wants the earrings to be just about 7 millimeters in width, so I often have to stop whatever project I'm currently cutting for a special order, and I never mind doing that for a client. So I pulled up my favorite Portuguese design, which was created by the late Jeff Graham, called Simple Portuguese. Simple? Well, he called it simple because it has one less row of facets than his other Portuguese design. Still, it has 145 little facets on each gemstone that has to be cut and polished, so I'm not sure it's simple, but it does make a beautiful gemstone. Jeff Graham did release this design into the public domain, and in a previous video I showed you how to go back in time in the internet to access all of the 24 or so of Jeff's free designs. Here is a link to that video if you're interested. There are more than just great free designs on that site, as Jeff was also a prolific writer and he wrote numerous articles on all aspects of gem cutting. I would recommend you check out his old site and read or download some of those articles. Here is what the final gemstones should look like when I cut them with Jeff's design. Here are the various ratios and other data regarding this design. Again, 145 facets. That's a lot for a little 7 millimeter gemstone, but it will definitely be a unique set of earrings for our client. And here are the cutting instructions for Jeff's design in case you don't want to have to go back in time to Jeff's old website and find the design yourself. I've oriented my amethyst and glued it with 2-part epoxy onto my dop stick so that the areas where there was lighter, there was zoning, those will be cut out. So fortunately most of the color is in the point, so I've got it set where the point is, and that'll ensure that the color kind of floods throughout the stone. So now I use my 240 grit diamond topper, and I'll start by preforming our stone here. Okay, I've preformed our amethyst with 240 grit diamond on topper lap. I still have a little ways to go, but on the pavilion you can see this shiny spot. This hasn't been touched yet, so that means I need to bring the stone in further or bring the pavilion down. But this is a special order, so I need to make it smaller anyway. It has to be a specific size for BOPIE, so this remaining piece from the rough won't impact us at all. It'll be cut out in the next phase when I go to my 600 grit diamond. So when I use a 340 grit topper, what I mean is it's a topper lap is a thin lap. It has to go on a master lap or another lap under it, and I use my ceramic lap as the master. This one's by Kent Supplies, but doesn't really matter. I buy these topper laps from anywhere, and I'd recommend you get about 100 grit, maybe something in the 150 grit range, something in the 200 range, and something in the 300 range. Maybe a 600 grit topper, but at the 600 or finer, I would not use toppers. They don't run perfectly flat, so they don't make your facets line up very well. Some people say they do run flat. They don't. I don't care which brand it is, they don't. So I wouldn't use toppers above the 600 grit level. And even at the 600 grit, I prefer my Crystalite solid steel lap. So this is a topper. You can get them on Amazon, eBay. A lot of lapidary supply stores have them. Again, I haven't found a particular brand that's better than any other particular brand. They're just, to me, just kind of used for roughing in the stone. Okay, just one more comment on these topper discs that I would use in the rougher grits. This one, and I don't know where I get them. You know, I look at eBay and Amazon and some of the lapidary supplies. This one happens to have a backing that you can peel off, and underneath it, it's got an adhesive, so you could stick it, instead of just sitting it on your master lap, you can actually glue it to your master lap. And I think if I was going to use toppers for the more finer grits, I'd say maybe the 600. I wouldn't use it for a 1200, but there are people who do. And if you're one of those cutters, I believe if I was going to use a 1200 grit, I would want one with the adhesive backing and glue it to a master lap. I think that would be less wobbly, but I don't know. If some of you have some experience with these toppers, let us know in the comments. Always willing to learn something. I've got the width of our amethyst just where I want it to be, right where it needs to be for this pair of earrings. So now I'll polish the girdle and then work on the rest of the pavilion. I finished polishing the pavilion of one of our earrings. So now I'll transfer this one in my dop and my transfer jig, and I'll start cutting the second earring, make sure I got the pavilion of that. So this polished right up with the Creamway lap by Gearloose with cerium oxide and water spray. I've gone over our amethyst for our earring with my 12M lap, which is in microns, so it's about a 1500 grit lap. And so because this stone is small, I'm going to go straight to polish from this 12M lap. So I'll use the Creamway with a spray bottle of water mixed with cerium oxide. So let's see how that polishing goes. I finished polishing the upper half of our amethyst for the earrings. I still have to cut the table, so I'll set up our Ultratech machine to cut the table and polish the table, then we'll be done with this one stone. Our table polished right up with, first I used 600 grit topper and then my 12M, and then I polished it with the Creamway lap with cerium oxide, and it polished right up. So now we'll take this dop off of our machine, put it in the acetone and soak it to remove the two-part epoxy, and then this one will be done, and we'll work on our other second amethyst for our pair of earrings. Finished polishing the pavilion of our second earring, so now I'll transfer the dop so I can cut the upper half or the crown of our amethyst. Before I remove my dop from my piece of rough so I can continue to cut the crown, notice I have a very long piece of rough here. So the first question is, how much rough do I need to cut the upper half or crown of my stone? Because we've already cut the pavilion. So the answer is you go to the instructions on the diagram, and the information there includes a C to W, C/W ratio, and that is your crown to width ratio. The crown is the upper half of the stone, and in this case, the C to W ratio is 0.207. So what you do is you measure the width of your stone, and this is just right about a 7mm stone, just exactly where we need it. You multiply 7 millimeters times your C to W ratio of 0.207, and that gives you 1.449, or about 1.45, and that's your C to W ratio. Now, that tells you how tall your crown has to be, 1.45 millimeters. But you also have to include a girdle. So you have to include the width of your girdle. So you take your 1.45 millimeters and you add an estimated girdle width of, it's going to be between 0.5, 0.3. And in this case, since it's a smaller stone, it's going to be 0.3. So that gives me the 1.45 plus the 0.3. I need 1.75 millimeters to cut my crown. So I made a mark at 1.75. It's actually at 1.8, just to give me a little extra room. And then if I cut on the outside, I have a little more leeway. So if I cut right here, I have enough space to cut the crown of our stone. Now, so then the question is, what do you do with this? Well, there's another ratio on your instructions called the H to W ratio, the height to width. And that tells you the total height of the total stone based on the width of the stone. And again, we know the width is 7 millimeters. So the height to width ratio is 0.682. So you take the 7 millimeters, 7 times 0.682, and that gives you 4.774, or about 4.8 millimeters. But again, and that's 4.8 millimeters is what you would need this to be, so you could cut an entire stone with this piece of rough, this remaining piece. I'm assuming I'm going to go to my trim saw and trim it off right here. So I'll have finished the crown here, this stone's done, and have enough left, already dopped up, already set to the right width, the girdle's already polished, and enough to cut a second stone. But your 4.774, you've got to add a girdle again. So add 0.3 for the girdle, and I need about 5.1 millimeters really to include a girdle. So I took my calipers and just measured to see if I had 5.1. There is enough, plenty enough to cut a second stone, because I'm going to trim this one up right here. So we'll be able to get 2 stones out of this piece of rough. So off to the trim saw. I've gone over our amethyst with a 600 grit. In this case I used a topper lap because the stone is small. I didn't need to start with a rougher lap, but I also didn't want to use my good Crystalite 600 solid steel lap because I was removing a little bit of rough. So I used a topper lap, and that's kind of preformed it. So that was the first lap I've used on the crown here, the crown or upper half of the stone. So I will use I used the 600, now I'm going to use my 12M, which is about a 1500 grit lap. And then I'll go to polish. So 600, 1500, and then I'll polish it with the Creamway lap by Gearloose and cerium oxide spray mixed with water. So because it's a small stone and because it's quartz, that method should work. We'll give it a try. Polish the crown or upper half of our second amethyst earrings. It polished right up with cerium oxide and the Creamway lap. So now I'll cut the table and polish the table, and we'll be done with this earring as well. Okay, I finished polishing the table on our second amethyst earring. So now I'll soak it in the acetone and get the adhesive off and we'll be able to weigh it, measure it, and send these off to BOPIE'S. In this video, I used some of the amethyst I had purchased a very long time ago while on a gem rough buying trip to Brazil. I had to use pieces that were larger, much larger than I needed, so there was a lot of waste of rough, but this was for a special order and the final size had to be exact, and I didn't have really small pieces of amethyst rough. I got a good deal on the amethyst all those years ago in Brazil anyway, so I didn't really worry too much about the waste. Also, I was able to trim the stone as I transferred from the pavilion to the crown and ended up with another piece of amethyst already dopped up with the girdle already polished, so I will be able to cut 2 gemstones from that one piece of rough instead of one, so I ended up with a bonus. So the waste wasn't that bad after all. I really like cutting the Portuguese design in gemstones. It is a lot of extra work because of all the facets involved. I don't think many people are going to cut a 7mm stone into a Portuguese design, but hey, that's what our client wanted, so I was happy to do it. I think any cutter would enjoy cutting a Portuguese design. Maybe not for the first stone a cutter cuts, but certainly it could be one of the first couple of stones a cutter starts to cut. I do recommend you give it a try. The final gemstones in a Portuguese style always look awesome. After preforming, I used just 3 laps. I used a 600 grit, my 12M, which is about a 1500 grit, and then straight to polish. And because the stone was small, the facets even smaller, and because it was quartz, I didn't need any other laps. Please let me know in the comments what you think of the gemstones and the design, and as always, happy fasting, everyone.